Think your job is tough? Try being a TIE fighter pilot with a life expectancy measured in combat stories rather than years, or a pod racer where 75% of rookies don't survive their first season. The Star Wars galaxy isn't just epic lightsaber duels and space battles, it's filled with working class beings taking on jobs that make combat duty look safe. Here's what really terrifies me. These jobs aren't just dangerous because of obvious threats like blaster fire. The truly chilling part is how the Empire, the Hutts, the criminal syndicates systematically engineered workplace conditions so brutal that death became statistical inevitability rather than occupational hazard. Today, we're exploring the 10 most lethal career paths in that galaxy far, far away, and I guarantee you'll never view your own workplace complaints the same way. Let's start with a job that looks glamorous, but's actually a death sentence with mood lighting. Working as an entertainer in Jabba's palace means you're one wrong dance move from becoming Rancor food. The mortality rate for Jabba's dancers was estimated at 40% annually according to Imperial intelligence reports from Legends material, and that's not including performers who simply disappeared. Here's what makes this insidious. You're not just dealing with the obvious trapdoor threat, you're working in environments saturated with spice fumes, dealing with drunk armed criminals daily, and serving crime lords who view you as disposable property. Jabba fed his previous dancer Ula to his Rancor for refusing to comply with his demands, which tells you everything about Hutt workplace philosophy. The economics are equally grim. Most entertainers aren't employees, they're indentured servants or slaves earning exactly nothing while risking everything. The Max Rebo band famously accepted unlimited food as payment instead of credits, demonstrating the non-existent negotiating power entertainers possess. Free performers who refused gigs found their families sold to slavers or themselves owing impossible debts. What really seals this as dangerous is the psychological warfare. You're performing for the galaxy's most violent criminals while a carnivorous beast waits beneath your feet, and your employer finds this hilarious. One sick day, one missed cue, one moment of defiance, and you're discovering why Rancors prefer their meals screaming. But as terrifying as palace entertainment sounds, at least you can see the threats coming. Our next profession involves dangers you literally cannot detect until they've killed you. Here's a recruitment fact Imperial posters omitted. Death Star maintenance workers are statistically more likely to die than survive their contracts, not from accidents, though common, but because your entire workplace was a priority military target that got obliterated twice. The first Death Star employed over 1 million personnel, with maintenance staff comprising 40% of that workforce. When Luke made that impossible shot, approximately 400,000 technicians and engineers died instantly. These weren't military personnel, they were contractors and civil servants who thought they'd landed stable government jobs. The second Death Star's destruction killed over 200,000 construction workers and technicians. Everyday dangers are equally severe. Death Star reactor cores required constant maintenance in environments with radiation levels exceeding safe exposure by hundreds of factors. Legends material reveals reactor technicians averaged just 4-year careers before terminal radiation sickness. The Empire's solution wasn't better shielding, just recruiting replacements and dumping sick workers at distant facilities. The thermal exhaust ports required monthly interior inspections, 2-meter shafts descending directly into reactor cores with no safety rails and extreme temperatures. Maintenance crews called these reactor roulette because inspection schedules overlapped with power fluctuations to save shutdown costs. Workers regularly fell to deaths or were flash incinerated. Here's the ultimate horror. Death Star workers couldn't quit. Imperial law classified the station as an active combat vessel, making all personnel subject to military jurisdiction. Attempted resignation was desertion, punishable by execution. Speaking of jobs where escape isn't possible, let's discuss working in the galaxy's most notorious prison mines. Kessel mining operations had documented mortality rates exceeding 80% within the first standard year, according to Pike Syndicate records that were likely underreporting. This job makes Death Star duty look like vacation work. Spice exists in underground deposits on Kessel, which has virtually no atmosphere. Miners work in poorly ventilated tunnels where single suit breaches mean asphyxiation in under 60 seconds. Temperatures fluctuate between freezing and scorching near volcanic vents, and Spice releases toxic gases during extraction, causing permanent neurological damage with prolonged exposure. The labor force is almost entirely enslaved. The Pike Syndicate sources workers from slave markets, prison transfers, and debt bondage schemes. According to Solo and extended canon material, slaves are literally worked to death and then replaced. There's no retirement because nobody retires. You die in mines, die from spice exposure, or get killed attempting to escape. Here's a disturbing detail from Legends. Escaped miners were recaptured because spice exposure created traceable chemical signatures in their bodies that bounty hunters could detect with specialized scanners. Your body chemistry became a tracking device. Successful escapees often found themselves addicted to the substance they'd mined. Working conditions violate every civilized labor law. Shifts exceed 20 hours with minimal breaks. Medical care is non-existent beyond basic first aid. Food and water are deliberately insufficient to prevent rebellion organization. The Pikes calculated that keeping workers perpetually weakened was more cost-effective than hiring guards. The job offers zero glory, recognition, or honor. Miners die anonymously in darkness, bodies disposed in unmarked pits, existence forgotten immediately. Our next job at least comes with impressive armor, even if survival odds aren't any better. This might be controversial, but being a stormtrooper is significantly more dangerous than pop culture admits. Sure, their aim is a running joke, but from workplace safety perspectives, this combines inadequate equipment with suicide mission deployments. Stormtrooper armor disperses blaster energy across its surface, which sounds protective until you realize every hit still delivers concussive force sufficient to break ribs, cause internal bleeding, and knock you unconscious. Canon sources confirm armor prevents lethal penetration, but doesn't stop serious injuries. You survive the initial hit, but might die from injuries later, which is arguably worse than a quick death. Mortality statistics are genuinely shocking. During Endor, Imperial forces suffered over 90% casualties among ground troops. Hutt, tactically a victory, still cost thousands of stormtrooper lives capturing a base rebels were evacuating. Scarif, nearly complete annihilation before the Death Star glassed the facility. These aren't acceptable casualty rates, they're suicide deployments where survival is exceptional. Training is another horror show. According to legends and canon sources like Lost Stars, stormtrooper training has a 30% washout rate, but washout doesn't mean returning to civilian life. Failed trainees are reassigned to labor battalions, penal regions, or simply executed. Here's the nightmare. Stormtroopers have zero agency in mission selection. When Vader orders your squad to board a rebel cruiser through active blast doors, you go. Refusing orders means execution for treason, and the Empire shoots deserters as morale lessons. At least stormtroopers fight for organized military. Our next job operates in murkier moral territory with fewer protections. Bounty hunting sounds romantic. Lone wolves taking dangerous contracts, answering to nobody, making your own rules. Reality is a cutthroat profession where most hunters don't survive 5 years, competition regularly turns lethal, and clients are as likely to kill you as pay you. The Bounty Hunters Guild maintains statistics revealing approximately 60% of registered hunters die within their first 3 standard years. That's not including unregistered hunters, who have worse survival rates because they lack guild protections and legal recourse when clients default on payments. Let's talk about what actually kills bounty hunters. Your fellow hunters are your biggest threat. Competition for high-value bounties creates situations where hunters actively sabotage, ambush, or kill each other. When Vader hired 6 bounty hunters for the Millennium Falcon, they weren't just competing, they were considering eliminating competition. Bosk and IG-88 had ongoing mutual assassination arrangements where each tried killing the other whenever paths crossed. Clients present the second major threat. Hutts, Black Sun, and even the Empire regularly hire hunters for jobs they don't intend paying for. The contract itself becomes the ambush. You deliver the target and face the client's security forces because dead hunters don't require payment. Jabba had documented history of feeding bounty hunters to his Rancor after they delivered valuable targets. Equipment costs create vicious economic cycles. Effective bounty hunting requires serious hardware costing hundreds of thousands of credits, meaning new hunters go into massive debt. Failed contracts mean lost income and falling behind on equipment loans to organizations that collect debts through repossession of body parts. Speaking of jobs requiring ruthlessness to survive, let's discuss a simultaneously prestigious and potentially fatal position. The Emperor's Royal Guard, those crimson-clad elite warriors surrounding Palpatine, represent what happens when you combine Special Forces training with job requirements that include dying for your employer without hesitation. This position offers incredible prestige and absolutely horrific working conditions. Selection for the Royal Guard is already a death sentence for most candidates. Canon and Legends sources detail training programs with 90% attrition rates, where attrition is Imperial bureaucracy for death. Prospective guards undergo the most brutal training in the Imperial military, including live combat scenarios against other candidates where surrender isn't an option. The final selection test involves candidates fighting each other to the death until only required numbers remained. The psychological conditioning is equally terrifying. Royal Guards undergo intensive indoctrination designed to completely suppress individual identity and survival instincts. You're trained to view your life as meaningless compared to the Emperor's safety. Guards are expected to intercept assassins with their bodies, knowing they'll die in the process. Here's where it gets really dark. Royal Guards know Palpatine doesn't actually need their protection. The Emperor is one of the galaxy's most powerful Force users, perfectly capable of defending himself. The Royal Guard exists as psychological theater. Elite warriors standing motionless for hours, reinforcing Palpatine's power. Working conditions are deliberately brutal as ongoing loyalty tests. Guards stand at attention 12 to 16-hour shifts without breaks, food, or water. The armor isn't climate controlled. You're forbidden from speaking, showing emotion, or acknowledging pain. Our next profession involves slightly less psychological warfare, but significantly more explosions. Ask any Imperial pilot recruiter and they'll tell you TIE fighter duty is prestigious. Ask any actual TIE pilot who survives long enough to speak candidly and they'll tell you it's a death sentence with extra steps. Average TIE fighter pilot life expectancy in active combat zones is approximately 6 months, including rear-line garrison duty. Let's talk about why these fighters are flying coffins. TIE fighters have no deflector shields, minimal armor plating, and no hyperdrive. This isn't design oversight. It's intentional cost cutting. The Empire calculated that TIE fighters are cheaper to manufacture than equipping them with adequate protection, and pilots are even cheaper to replace. You're flying a cockpit strapped to engines with weapons bolted on sides. A single direct hit is immediately fatal. The lack of life support creates additional nightmares. TIE pilots wear fully sealed flight suits because cockpits aren't pressurized for space combat. Your suit carries limited oxygen, meaning extended patrols become suffocation countdowns. If your fighter is damaged but not destroyed, you're trapped in a tumbling cockpit with dwindling oxygen, unable to abandon ship because TIE fighters lack ejection systems. Combat tactics essentially guarantee high casualties. Imperial doctrine emphasizes overwhelming numerical superiority and aggressive pursuit, which is military language for we expect you to die, but there are more of you than they have ammunition. During Yavin, rebel fighters had kill ratios exceeding 8 to 1 against TIE fighters. Endor was worse. Entire squadrons were obliterated in minutes. Speaking of jobs where death is just another Tuesday, let's talk about racing. Pod racing is the galaxy's most popular spectator sport, drawing billions of viewers and generating trillions in gambling revenue. It's also statistically more dangerous than military combat, with mortality rates making bounty hunting look safe. According to race statistics from Canon and Legends sources, approximately 30% of pod racers die during their first racing season, and over 60% don't survive to see a third season. Let's break down why this sport is legalized suicide. Pod racers are essentially massive jet engines connected by energy binders to pilot pods, traveling at speeds exceeding 900 km per hour through obstacle-laden courses with minimal safety features. Courses are deliberately designed to be deadly: tight corners, rocky terrain, flaming methane lakes on Malastare, and Beggar's Canyon on Tatooine where pilots navigate stone formations at racing speed with clearance measured in meters. Mechanical failures are constant and universally catastrophic. When pod racing engines fail at speed, there's no gentle slowdown. Energy binders connecting engines to pods fail, and suddenly you're tumbling at lethal velocity in an unpowered pod or experiencing uncontrolled spin that usually ends with racers being smashed into canyon walls. Then there's sabotage. Pod racing is rife with premeditated murder disguised as mechanical failure. Wealthy gamblers regularly bribe pit crews to sabotage engines, criminal organizations eliminate racers who don't cooperate with fixed matches, and racers themselves sabotage competitors. The Bunta Eve Classic averages 4 racer deaths per event. Financial exploitation is equally brutal. Most pod racers aren't wealthy professionals. They're slaves, like young Anakin, or desperately poor beings gambling their lives for prize money they'll likely never win. But as deadly as pod racing is, at least danger comes from speed and mechanical failure. Our next 2 jobs involve creatures that actively want to eat you. Working as a Rancor keeper, the person responsible for feeding, maintaining, and controlling these massive carnivorous beasts, combines extreme physical danger with profound emotional trauma in unique ways. The mortality rate for Rancor keepers is approximately 50% within 3 years of employment, counting only keepers working for relatively professional operations like Jabba's palace. Let's talk about what makes this job uniquely dangerous. Rancors are immensely powerful creatures, measuring 5 meters tall and possessing strength sufficient to casually rip humanoid beings apart. They're also intelligent, smarter than they usually receive credit for, which means they remember keepers who've mistreated them and can plan revenge. You're not managing a mindless beast. You're managing a relationship with something that could kill you effortlessly and might be considering it. The feeding process is where most keepers die. Rancors require massive amounts of fresh meat daily, preferably live prey because hunting simulation keeps them psychologically healthy. This means keepers regularly enter Rancor pits, carrying or hurting animals that trigger predatory instincts. One miscommunication, one moment of aggressive feeding response, and the keeper becomes the meal. According to Legends material from Tales from Jabba's Palace, Malakili witnessed 3 assistant keepers die during feeding operations over his tenure. Then there's the emotional component making this uniquely traumatic. Rancors are capable of forming strong bonds with keepers. Keepers become genuinely attached to their charges, and these creatures reciprocate that loyalty. When Luke killed Jabba's Rancor, Malakili's anguished sobbing wasn't theatrical. The death was emotionally equivalent to losing family. We've finally reached number 1, and this job combines every nightmare element we've discussed into one spectacularly lethal package. If working as a Kessel Spice miner was the worst job in the galaxy, being the supervisor is somehow even more dangerous while offering zero additional compensation. Supervisors have mortality rates exceeding 90% within 2 years of employment, face threats from both above and below in organizational hierarchy, and exist in constant danger, making every other job on this list look manageable. Let's start with why supervisors die faster than the miners they manage. You're responsible for production quotas deliberately set impossibly high by Pike Syndicate leadership. Fail to meet these quotas and you're executed as an incompetence example to motivate your replacement. Quotas account for zero variation in mining conditions, equipment failures, or worker availability. You hit the numbers or you die. The miners themselves present constant lethal threats. You're overseeing enslaved beings who have zero reason to cooperate and every reason to kill you if opportunity presents. Supervisors sleep in the same facility as miners because Pikes won't spend credits on separate quarters, meaning you're unconscious and vulnerable among beings you've been brutalizing daily. Miner uprisings kill supervisors regularly, and the Pikes' solution isn't better security, it's just appointing new ones. The Pikes themselves are your deadliest threat. The Syndicate operates on principles making the Empire look humanitarian. Here's what really makes this the galaxy's most dangerous job. Being a Kessel supervisor means you're simultaneously oppressor and victim in a system designed to kill everyone involved. No glory, no honor, no legacy, and statistically no survival. So there you have it. The 10 most dangerous jobs in the Star Wars galaxy, ranked from merely terrifying to absolutely nightmare-inducing. From Hutt Palace entertainers, one misstep from the Rancor pit, to Kessel supervisors caught between impossible quotas and murderous miners, these jobs remind us that the Star Wars universe isn't just heroic adventures. It's also filled with ordinary beings trying to survive in extraordinarily dangerous circumstances, often with no choice about their employment and no hope of retirement beyond death. Next time you're watching Star Wars and see background characters, technicians on the Death Star, guards by the Emperor, the poor soul cleaning up after Jabba's parties, remember, they're not just set dressing, they're individuals trapped in systematically deadly occupations, and their stories are just as compelling. Speaking of compelling stories, I've created a video exploring another fascinating aspect of Star Wars lore that connects to several jobs we discussed today. You'll find the link in the description below. Definitely check it out. If you found this exploration of Star Wars' most dangerous careers as fascinating as I did researching it, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're constantly diving deep into the lore and hidden stories that make this galaxy far, far away so endlessly compelling. Drop a comment telling me which job you'd want least. Personally, I'm going with Kessel Supervisor because at least TIE pilots die quickly. Until next time, may the Force be with you and may your career choices be significantly better than any of these poor souls we discussed today.